Hi, my name is Rosemary Jackson, and the topic that I've chose to relate communication to is the sport of basketball. The reason I chose this is because I've played basketball most of my life, and I'm continuing to do so in college. The four aspects of communication that I've related the sport of basketball to are verbal communication, nonverbal communication, active listening, and passive listening. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is verbal communication. Verbal communication is the use of sounds and words to express oneself. So, some examples I've related this to in basketball is when a coach yells at a play, they're verbally communicating for his or her team to do something. So, that's the first example. The second example is when a player yells out to their teammate that a screen's coming. This is signaling for them that they need to either go around it or go under it, but it's just a sign of letting them know that a screen's coming. The second aspect of communication that I'm going to talk about is nonverbal communication. So, nonverbal communication is the transmission of messages or signals through nonverbal platforms such as eye contact, facial expressions, gestures, and postures. So, some examples of nonverbal communication that I used are body language. Usually, body language, it can determine whether how good or how bad a player is doing. So, if you see that a player has their head down and they don't look engaged, that their body language is signaling that they most likely aren't doing well. But in opposition, if a player has an energetic look or they're clapping, this means they're engaged in the game and they're doing well. Another form of nonverbal communication is the whistle that referees use. This signals something that's happening in the game. So the whistle could be used to call a foul, traveling. It also can be used to start or stop the game. You might see the referee blow the whistle and then throw the ball up, and that initiates the start of the game. The last form of nonverbal communication that I have an example of is hand signals. So these hand signals could be used when the gym is loud and players or players to coach can't hear each other, so they use hand signals in order to call out a play or a certain action while the game's going. So those are my examples of nonverbal communication. The third aspect of communication that I've related to basketball is active listening. Active listening is the attentive listening and positive engagement in a conversation with someone. So if a player is active listening or has active listening, then this means this shows how good of a player they are. They're being engaged with what's being told with them. So an example is if a coach gives an instruction, they take in that information and they follow it, so they execute it. Another example is constructive criticism. So again, they're taking in that information and they're using it. The last aspect of communication in basketball that I'm going to discuss is passive listening. So plassive listening is listening without reacting. So it's basically in one ear and out the other. This player isn't taking in information like they should be. They're not taking directions or criticisms from their coach or players. They also have like the label of uncoachable. So an example of passive listening would be like a ball hog. They don't listen. They're basically a rogue player and they just want to do their own thing. So in conclusion, these four aspects, verbal and nonverbal communication, as well as passive listening, are how communication relates to the sport of basketball.